Tonight, I want you to picture a very simple scene. You step out onto your porch after witnessing a strange object in the sky. Your heart is still pounding, a mixture of awe and fear. You haven't even told anyone yet when you hear a knock at the door. Standing before you are tall, thin men with pale skin, dressed in immaculate black suits and black hats. Their eyes are cold, their smiles stiff like masks. They speak very little, their voices flat, mechanical. But their message is unmistakable. Forget what you just saw, never speak of it again, or you will regret it. Then they turn, vanish into the darkness. The question is, who are they? Government agents sent to silence witnesses, aliens in disguise, or something even stranger? The story of the men in black may sound like Hollywood fiction, something we know from Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones in the blockbuster films. But the truth is that files on them appeared in the 1950s and 1960s, and perhaps centuries before that. Witnesses, researchers, even doctors and journalists have told of bizarre encounters with men in black suits. The common thread: they always appear right after a UFO event, and they always leave behind a warning, a streak of fear etched deep in the memory of the witness. To understand why this phenomenon haunts so deeply, we must rewind to 1947. Roswell. A strange object crashes into the New Mexico desert. The U.S. military cordons off the area, recovers the debris. At first, newspapers announce, "Flying disc recovered." But just a day later, the government claims it was only a weather balloon. That denial didn't quash suspicion, it ignited it. From Roswell onward, Americans began to believe the government is hiding the truth about UFOs. Roswell opened the floodgates of distrust, and suddenly, any mysterious figure who appeared near witnesses carried the color of conspiracy. And in the 1950s, UFO reports surged. People saw strange lights in the sky, discs hovering, even non-human entities. But alongside those stories came another, of strangers, usually in pairs or trios, dressed in black suits, driving black cars, knocking on the doors of witnesses. They asked questions, they threatened silence. Soon they acquired a name that sounded both official and chilling: Men in Black. Among countless cases, the story of Albert K. Bender stands out like a milestone. A former U.S. Air Force serviceman, Bender was so fascinated by UFOs that in 1952 he founded the International Flying Saucer Bureau, one of the first global UFO organizations. He published a regular bulletin, quickly drawing tens of thousands of readers worldwide. His reports covered strange phenomena and even announced plans for the first UFO convention, a gathering where believers could share and compare their experiences. But then, something inexplicable happened. In early 1953, Bender abruptly shut everything down, dissolved the organization, stopped publishing the bulletin. In the final issue, he left a chilling message: "We advise those engaged in saucer work to please be very cautious." No explanation, no farewell, just a cryptic warning. Friends said that after this, Bender was never the same. He grew anxious, restless, plagued by sleepless nights and violent headaches. He was no longer the confident leader of a global UFO movement, but a haunted man, terrified of something unseen. For nearly a decade, he refused to explain. Finally, in 1962, he told the truth, or at least what he believed it to be. He claimed that just before he quit, he had been visited by 3 men in black. They didn't knock. They didn't introduce themselves. They simply appeared as if from nowhere. Bender described them as tall, thin, with lifeless faces and piercing eyes. Their voices were flat, mechanical. They warned him to abandon his research or face dire consequences. The warning was enough. He left it all behind, living the rest of his life in silence. At first glance, this could be dismissed as the fantasy of a paranoid man. But here's the strange part. Bender never exploited his story. He didn't sell bestsellers, didn't go on speaking tours. He stayed silent for years, only admitting details when pressed again and again. Why would a man with a thriving community abandon it all, unless something truly terrified him? This is why the Bender case is considered the cornerstone of the Men in Black legend. From there, the shadow of the Men in Black grew. More UFO witnesses described similar experiences, being watched, threatened, silenced. Some described the men's strange appearance, skin too smooth, faces without eyebrows, without eyelashes, sometimes not even understanding how to use everyday objects. One story tells of a man in black attempting to drink Jell-O with a spoon as if he didn't know it was food. Details like this made the government agent theory harder to swallow. Something about their behavior simply wasn't human. Then in 1976, another incident elevated the fear to an entirely new level. Dr. Herbert Hopkins, a respected physician in Maine, was home alone studying a UFO case. He received a phone call from a so-called New Jersey UFO organization asking if they could visit. He hung up, stepped outside to turn on the porch light, and found a man already walking up to his door. The figure was tall, gaunt, wearing a baggy black suit. His skin was ghostly white. He was completely bald. No eyebrows, no eyelashes. When he removed his hat, Hopkins saw that his lips were not real lips, but a perfectly straight slit, smeared with bright red lipstick. His voice was monotonous, mechanical, without inflection. The stranger asked Hopkins to take a copper coin from his pocket. Hopkins complied. Right before his eyes, the coin changed color, blurred, and vanished completely. The man said, "If you do not destroy all of your UFO material, you will vanish like the coin." Hopkins recalled being nearly hypnotized. He agreed. The stranger then slurred his words, said his energy was running low, and staggered down the steps. Hopkins watched him hobble out of sight, then a sudden flash of light and silence. When his family returned later, they found him sitting motionless in the living room, every light in the house blazing. If this were a single story, it could be dismissed as delusion. But from Bender to Hopkins to countless others, the same elements repeat: black suits, pale skin, flat voices, threats of silence. Gradually, the Men in Black became not a one-off myth, but a pattern, a ritual that follows any brush with UFOs. Even stranger, the phenomenon is not limited to America, nor to the post-Roswell era. There are accounts far older. One from 1665 in England describes villagers witnessing strange lights in the sky, followed the next day by 3 pale-skinned men in black who warned them never to speak of it. Hard to verify, yes, but it suggests that the Men in Black may not be a product of the 20th century at all, but a presence stretching back centuries. That 1665 tale is a dark thread linking to the 20th century shadows. That night, villagers watched strange lights sweep across the sky, glows looping over fields like whales surfacing and diving in an ocean of ink. The next morning, 3 pale men in black entered the village. They were neither merchants nor priests. They silently interrogated villagers about what they had seen. When one local, hard-nosed and unafraid of outsiders, snapped back, demanding who they were, his body collapsed as though crushed by invisible force. Later, he described it as if his skull had filled with water, ears roaring, limbs numb. One of the strangers turned, his voice flat as still water. "Speak no more of the sky last night." Then they walked toward the woods and vanished. The men of the village armed themselves, scoured every path but found no trace. From then on, they called it the Day of the Warlocks. You may say, folklore, village legend. Perhaps. But by the 19th century, London itself swarmed with rumors of a dark figure leaping like a spring-heeled Jack, dressed in a black cloak and hat, sometimes knocking at doors, terrifying people, then vaulting onto rooftops like a demonic bird. Some mistook him for a policeman because of his sharp attire until his metallic claws slashed their skin. In scattered reports, the silhouette of the black-clad stranger reappears, a habit of impersonating authority and then slipping away in an impossible bound. Not quite Men in Black in the modern sense, but proof that the motif of black-clad strangers arriving after something strange is an old fold in history. Fast forward to the mid-20th century. Roswell had sparked suspicion. UFO sightings were mushrooming. And some reports felt unsettling not because they were too outlandish, but because they were almost too mundane. Like the 1947 Puget Sound case, Maury Island. Harold Dahl claimed that donut-shaped craft dumped molten slag onto his boat, killing a dog, injuring his son, damaging the vessel. The very next morning, a man in a dark suit invited Dahl to breakfast and recounted the incident in exact detail, as if he'd been on the boat, before warning him to keep silent for his family's sake. No magic, no vanishing coins, just a coldly human threat. Researchers like John Keel later suspected this was cover work. Local intelligence intercepting information, adopting the Man in Black persona to kill the story before it spread. A branch of the tree. MIB as tactic, not entity. But Keel also pushed us further. He coined the phrase, high strangeness, cases that go beyond human behavior. He was the investigative soul behind the Mothman case at Point Pleasant, where Men in Black didn't just knock on doors, they knocked reality off balance, wearing uniforms with wrong shoes, asking irrelevant questions, misusing common items, as if testing how humans would react to a badly written script. One officer tried to drink Jell-O like soup. Another froze in fascination at a ballpoint pen, laughed maniacally when given it, and ran off like a child caught with candy. Details like these don't fit the CIA. They carry the feeling of something imitating humanity and failing. Look closely at how they appear. In Maine, 1976, Dr. Herbert Hopkins receives a phone call. He hangs up, steps outside to switch on the porch light, and the Man in Black is already standing on the steps. No car, no figure crossing the lawn, and this was long before mobile phones. The stranger has no eyebrows, no eyelashes. When he wipes the back of his hand across his mouth, the red lipstick smears across his cheek, revealing a slit, not lips. He tells Hopkins to take out a coin. Before the doctor's eyes, the coin changes color, blurs, and vanishes. If you don't destroy the files, you will disappear like this. An empty threat, one that would make a rational man laugh, if not for the way his energy drained as he spoke, voice slowing, each syllable dropping out like a dying battery, before he clutched the railing, shuffled down the steps, and a silent flash of light slashed across the night. Skeptics say, hypnosis, parlor trick. Perhaps, or perhaps, what we witnessed was a device going offline. There is another recording, chilling in a different way. In 2008, a hotel employee near Niagara reported seeing a strange craft over the river at dawn. 2 weeks later, two men in black walked into the lobby. The CCTV camera, mounted high in the corner, captured them from the moment they pushed open the door. Their strides identical, step length identical, the way their shoulders swung, the way their necks turned, identical to the point of absurdity. They were dressed like replicas, hats, suits, ties, flawless fabric without a wrinkle. Staff described their eyes as icy blue, unblinking, their movements deliberate, restrained, neither too fast nor too slow, like every gesture was being logged into a memory system without emotion. They asked for the witness. He wasn't on shift that day. So they turned to broad questions about UFOs, about strange things around here, recording answers with stone-faced recall. Then they turned, left, and vanished. Later, some tried to tie the footage to the promotional campaign for Men in Black 3, filing it away as marketing. but the timestamp read 2008. And the unease in the receptionist's voice when he recalled the event was not something an extra could fake after one rehearsal. It was the kind of discomfort only someone who has stood too long next to a man who doesn't blink would understand. There has also been a quiet shift across the decades. In the 1950s and 60s, visitors from Venus or Mars were still called space brothers, looking like Europeans with blonde hair, or men with olive skin and gentle eyes, speaking of peace. Before that, a U.S. Air Force general once dodged a question by saying, "The pilots of those craft are not Spaniards." The strange answer betrayed a truth. Many witnesses were seeing beings that looked very human, sometimes with vaguely Asian features, sometimes Nordic, sometimes like the Lapland people of Northern Europe, faces that seemed a blend of two bloodlines. Gradually, through the 1970s to the 1990s, the grays took over popular culture. Almond-shaped black eyes, small frail bodies, plastic-like skin, the image of alien cemented in global imagination. At the same time, men in black became mainstream through Hollywood, swallowing every search result. In recent years, another coat of paint has been added. UFOs are renamed UAPs, a neutral, bloodless term palatable to congressional hearings. Each change in language is like changing a sign on a store, while inside, the same old product is being sold. Don't ask questions. The thread that haunts me is not just the black suits, the hats. It's the off-key quality, something not quite right in every stitch. A colonel in sneakers, an agent trying to drink Jell-O, pairs or trios of men speaking in flat, neutral phrases until one slip reveals something grotesquely wrong, like a discordant note on a piano. They know exactly what you've seen, even though you haven't told a soul. They arrive impossibly fast, faster than any normal intelligence-gathering method should allow. And sometimes, they miss the basics of human behavior: food, manners, rhythm of speech, the way we look at each other, as if they had memorized a script but never actually lived among us. Of course, there is a systematic explanation for all of it: psychological warfare. If I were a counterintelligence officer in the 1950s, I could tap hardline phones, plant a man at the fence, follow your walk to the cinema, search your attic office. I could powder the face of a tall, thin recruit, dress him in a dark suit, teach him a handful of cryptic lines, phrases that would mushroom in the memory of someone I wanted to intimidate. I could tell him to switch from Cadillacs to Volkswagens just to mock a journalist writing about black Cadillacs. I could stage a scene of just enough absurdity to push the victim toward superstition, ensuring that any later testimony would be laughed off. That script is neat. It explains many cases, but it does not explain them all, because there are cases that don't fit a human timetable. There are those instant arrivals after a landline call, like Hopkins, where even the best surveillance team would struggle to explain it. There are physical anomalies, the vanishing coin, that you can call sleight of hand, but who was the magician, and who guaranteed that a trained doctor wouldn't recognize a parlor trick? There are appearances, unblinking eyes, poreless skin, a mouth like a penciled line, where the word disguise sounds more like a plea than an explanation. And if we lean toward the spiritual, the shadow figures, the wide-brimmed hat man, the black-eyed children who stand under your porch, asking to be let in, then we must accept that the story of the men in black does not exist on a single plane. It is a bundle of chords, some human, some demonic, something else. Looking back at the classic reports, I always see these three strands braided together. In England, 1665, it smelled of sorcery. In Puget Sound, it smelled of intelligence ops. At Niagara, it smelled of copies. In Maine, 1976, it smelled of a device running out of power. And in America of the 1950s, it smelled of Majestic 12, documents that everyone claims are fake Yet veterans of the field know. There are clauses inside that are too perfectly written in the language of tradecraft: misdirection, discrediting, hijacking terminology, standardizing narrative. When a story falls into that rhythm, it becomes reasonable, and in that reasonableness, invisible. And never forget the strange coincidences. They arrive before you speak. How many times have witnesses said they hadn't breathed a word to their wife or children about what they'd just seen in the field when there came a knock at the door? You might say, gossiping neighbors. But many of these events happened in the dead of night, in empty places, with only one person looking up. If not phone taps, when you hadn't spoken to anyone yet, then what? Listening to thoughts? I don't like that answer. But those who've faced them all report the same thing. They knew what I was thinking. Maybe it's only the language of describing the pressure of intimidation in your own living room, or maybe it's a slip of the tongue pointing to a technology not our own. The men in black, if real, seem to hate two things: light and laughter. They appear in dim houses, on porches without bulbs, in hotel lobbies chilled too cold by the air conditioning. They don't joke. They don't know when to smile. They target those who've just been rattled by a strange shock, an unusual light, a craft, a figure in an airplane window. They ask questions whose answers don't matter, and then they leave, depositing a block of silence in their place. After that, they leave the rest to us. Fear and doubt will do the rest of the work. Some tell me it's all a psychological phenomenon, a cultural byproduct of a society addicted to conspiracy. Maybe. But remember, that culture grew out of very ordinary people: a doctor in Maine, a former serviceman publishing a newsletter, a hotel receptionist, a villager in 1665. They had nothing to gain by telling their stories, and much to lose: their peace of mind. And if you think Hollywood swallowed the term men in black with hats, sunglasses, and rap music, try this. Type those words into a search bar, scroll past a few dozen pages, mute the soundtrack, and watch the Niagara CCTV clip again. Identical steps like mirror images. A total absence of blinking. The sudden unease of a hotel guest who instinctively shifted aside to let them pass. Those small details require no special effects. They require presence. Tonight, if you happen to look up and see something sliding across the sky without sound, if your heart begins to pound as though in debt, if you return home later than usual, flip on the porch light, and see a figure waiting, they will be polite. They will ask a few questions, dropping words that chill you because they know too much. They will remind you of the loved ones you cherish most. They will smile with a mouth that isn't a mouth, in a voice as flat as the heartbeat line of something without a heart, and then they will leave. You can chase them, demand identification, you can call the police, you can post about it online, and within a day, your story will sink beneath memes and images of Will Smith in a suit. You'll think you were foolish. Your family will tell you not to speak of it again. Everything will return to normal, until another night, when you hear that soft knock, like a question. And this time, you might do what few ever do: don't open. We can argue until morning about their nature, man, machine, or phantom. We can map a timeline from 1665 to the 1950s, pin markers on the map, connect them with black thread. But there is one simple truth that all who've met them agree upon: nothing good follows the arrival of the men in black. And there is one recommendation, as old as it is weary, whispered by those who survived their own memories. When you've just seen something that doesn't belong to this world, and then there's a knock at your door, keep your hand on the latch, not because you are a coward, but because some doors, once opened, will never close the same again. If you look through all of these stories, from a rural village in 17th century England to the dark alleys of 19th century London to the UFO newsletters of the 1950s, you will see a red thread, The men in black suits don't just exist as characters in ghost stories. They operate like a mechanism that appears whenever something breaks through the boundaries of accepted reality. And that mechanism always delivers one message: silence. But to understand better, you have to examine the small details most people overlook. In one U.S. case from the 1960s, a UFO witness was visited by an Air Force officer. His uniform was immaculate: shoulder boards, nameplate, every stitch in place, except for his shoes. He wore bright white sneakers. In the middle of a pressed military uniform, those shoes stood out like a bad joke, and they unsettled the witness more than any threat could. Who makes such a basic mistake? Unless they don't actually know what the right detail is supposed to be. Then there are the questions the men in black ask, so absurd they're hard to believe. One woman said that after she saw strange lights in her yard, two men in black came to her home. Instead of asking about the craft, they picked up a kettle on the table, turned it in their hands, and asked, "What is this used for?" You might laugh and dismiss her as fabricating, but other witnesses describe the same pattern, being asked about pens, spoons, chairs, as though the men in black weren't there to suppress UFOs at all, but to study the most basic objects of human life. John Keel once wrote that in many reports, the men in black were described as having features almost Asian but not Asian, a face caught between East and West but belonging fully to neither. He compared them to the Laplanders of Northern Europe, whose history of intermingling created features that resist classification. Perhaps what he meant was this: they look human but not quite. What haunted researchers like Keel most was the sense of being watched before you even opened your mouth. Many witnesses said they never reported their sighting, not even to their wives or children. Yet the very next day there came a knock, and the men in black recited back to them exactly what had happened. Where did that information come from? If not eavesdropping, then only two possibilities remain: either a technology far beyond our time, or the ability to read thoughts. This is where the theories branch. One claims the men in black are government agents, usually CIA or Air Force, sent to stamp out rumors. They use psychological tactics: dress strangely, behave unpredictably, plant an irrational fear in the witness's mind. A confused witness will never be seen as credible. In this way, the men in black both suppress the truth and discredit those who dare speak. If this is all, then the men in black are nothing more than Cold War actors. But another theory is more chilling. They are not human. They disguise themselves, but never perfectly. The wrong shoes, the way they drink Jell-O, the confusion over a ballpoint pen. All of it points to an entity trying to impersonate humanity, and failing. And if you accept that idea, then the men in black are the mannequins of another intelligence, whether extraterrestrial or something older, slipping into human society to control information about their own presence. There is also a third branch, one few dare to follow. The men in black are neither government nor alien, but supernatural. In European folklore, there are stories of the Hat Man, a figure with a wide-brimmed hat who appears only in bedrooms at midnight, standing silently in the corner, unmoving but radiating dread. In modern accounts, some witnesses say they saw the men in black accompanied by black-eyed children, those beings who knock at the door, ask to come in, and paralyze with fear. If the connection is real, then the men in black may not come from any planet, but from another layer of reality altogether, one we have no language to describe. Documents like Majestic 12 only muddy the water further. Many dismiss them as hoaxes, yet their contents are disturbingly precise. Use media to misdirect, plant false stories to smear witnesses, seed fictional tales into popular culture so the truth becomes a joke. Search for Men in Black online and you'll drown in movie posters of Will Smith, a perfect keyword hijack. And when the truth is buried beneath a mountain of fiction, it becomes almost unreal. The question remains, if all this is just human trickery, Why are there so many irrational fragments? Why did a coin vanish in front of Dr. Hopkins's eyes? Why did a hotel camera record two men moving identically, step for step, gesture for gesture? Why do witnesses report men in black arriving before a word has ever left their lips? The answer may be beyond reach. Perhaps the government and the entities cooperate. Perhaps the government simply exploits the legend to mask technology. Or perhaps, as many believe, the men in black are gatekeepers sent to ensure that the truth about UFOs, extraterrestrials, or other dimensions never spills out. What is certain is that those who face them are changed forever. Albert Bender abandoned his research and lived the rest of his life in silence. Herbert Hopkins crumbled, haunted until he died. The Niagara Hotel staff never forgot the icy blue eyes of the two strangers. And countless other witnesses, ordinary people who never sought UFOs, became victims of uninvited knocks at their door. If this is all delusion, why does the pattern repeat across centuries and continents? If this is only intimidation, why do the irrational details appear with such consistency? And if these are only agents, why do they look not human? Here, in the darkness between truth and deception, the men in black stand as a marker. Perhaps they are a mirror of ourselves, reflecting our fear of control. Perhaps they are ancient memories reborn in modern shape. Or perhaps they are simply something we should not name. As we close this investigation, remember one thing: witnesses never volunteered to become witnesses. They only looked up, saw what they weren't meant to see, and carried the weight of fear for the rest of their lives. And in many cases, the quiet knock at midnight was more terrifying than the craft itself, because UFOs can leave, but the men in black will step inside. If one night you see strange lights and then hear a knock, ask yourself, do you dare open the door?